And I say that's a bold confession, commendable confession, we would say. He will follow Christ regardless of consequences, regardless of the outcome for himself or his relationships to others. I will follow thee. It's a kind of confession that we would think every Christian should make. Lord, and the willingness to follow the Lord wherever he will lead, whatever he requires, and whatever the consequences may be for our life. We would say, would that we could likewise make such a serious commitment to our Lord Jesus Christ and declare before all, he's my Lord, and I will follow him wherever he will lead. But there's a condition attached to this confession. But let me first go and bid farewell to those of my house. I say that's a serious condition. It would seem to be a good thing. Should not every child of God be willing and ready to show his concern for those of his own household? The man may have in mind his father or mother, or both. Surely Christ doesn't expect this disciple, this would-be disciple, simply to go on his way after Christ without ever telling his father or his mother where he's going, what he's going to do. Let me first bid farewell to those of my house, says he. He may have been married, he may have had children, and again, why would one require of such a man to follow after Christ without ever going back and telling his family where he's going? He had other relatives and friends there as well, no doubt. He had been raised in a certain area and raised in such a way that he had established friendships. He had work perhaps there to do. If he's going to follow Christ, he must leave properly. And after all, if he's going to follow Christ, isn't it only fair and welcome even to go back to his friends, his relatives, and have a farewell party, perhaps, so that they can properly bid goodbye to one another, and then he can go on his way to follow Christ. Every child of God surely loves his family. Every child of God does not want his family to think that he disappeared suddenly without ever saying goodbye to them. And so this man seems to make a reasonable request of our Lord Jesus Christ. Let me say farewell to those of my household, father, mother, wife, children, friends, and relatives. Let me say farewell to my boss for whom I work, and then I will go and follow thee. So we would perhaps be inclined to commend this would-be disciple for showing that kind of concern for his relationships to others, and then that he would go and follow after Christ. But it isn't all that it seems to be. The confession the man made first, from a certain point of view, seems very commendable. I said we ourselves might express a desire to give such a heartfelt confession. I will follow thee, Lord. I will follow thee after I've fulfilled these commitments I have to my relatives. You notice, in the first place, that what this man has to say to Christ is not simply, Lord, let me go first. Let me go. It's the form of a command. Lord, I must go first to bid farewell to those of my household. He's commanding Christ, not just requesting, which itself may have been improper, but he's commanding Christ. I must do this. There's no argument, no question about it. He will carry out this particular task without doubt or question. Christ has to accept his conditions for discipleship. I must follow thee after I say farewell to those of my household. That's one. A command to the one he said, thou art my Lord. Who's Lord? If he won't obey his Lord, he's not a proper disciple. But in the second place, you notice, I must do that first. You know, again, from a certain point of view, from a temporal point of view, that may seem to be the proper approach. How could he say it after he followed Christ? He would first say goodbye, then he would follow Christ. But it's more than that. This first is a matter of priority, you see. He will follow Christ, but there's something first that's more important, and that is to deal with his relatives, his friends, and say goodbye to them in a proper, appropriate manner. And then Christ will follow. He will be a disciple of Jesus Christ. That's the sin of his confession. A command to the Christ, I must do it, and the priority, I will do it first. So he would go home, not just to say goodbye to father and mother and then turn and follow Christ, but he would say goodbye to them in an appropriate manner. He would take his time to say goodbye to them. He would have his parties that he would use as a means of saying farewell. All of these things come first in his mind. One can well imagine that saying goodbye could take months and months, perhaps many years, before he would finally say, now I can follow Christ. After I'm older, after my parents have died, after my duties are finished within the home, then I am willing to follow after the Christ. There are extended farewells that he requires. And after that's all taken care of, then will come this following after. The attitude of this would-be disciple is perhaps the attitude of many in our day and age, and sometimes perhaps the attitude of ourselves as well. Christ is important. He is Lord, our Lord. We confess his power. We confess the fact that he has delivered us from sin and death. But first we have these other obligations to take care of. And I say many of our day and age would do the same thing. Following Christ may seem important, but there are other things in their lives that are of greater importance. Christ uses an example, a figure of speech, as it were, an illustration. He says, no man putting his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of heaven. No man is fit for that kingdom if he does not first see the Christ as Lord, whom he must follow. The figure is an interesting one. The figure is a man who is plowing his field, and as you know, in those days they used no tractors, they didn't have such, but oxen probably, sometimes unruly oxen besides. They would have plows not of the sort that we have today, but very likely a plow made of wood with perhaps an edge of iron on that plow. It would be a difficult thing to manage, to direct the plow in such a way that he would plow a straight furrow, a straight line. That's a figure that Christ uses. Same thing we have today, though we have modern equipment. Farmers today, too, can plow with their tractors in the field. They have to watch where they're going.